They buried me in laughter before I ever got the chance to rise, not in a coffin, not in the ground, but under the weight of their arrogance, their smirks, and their polished shoes, stepping over my ambition like it was trash in their way. I give him 6 months before he gives up, Bobby had said, clinking glasses with Diana in that marble-floored boardroom. People like Ted don't make it past the parking lot. They all laughed, and I died, a wreck on Route 47. Rain-slick pavement, head-on collision. I heard the crunch of metal, saw the smear of headlights, then black. No pain, no sound, just nothing, until I opened my eyes and saw my old apartment, my old clock, a date I knew too well to years before my death. The universe didn't send a warning. It gave me a second chance. This time, I remembered where every market would turn. I knew which apps would explode, which stocks would soar, which companies would quietly go bankrupt while looking profitable on paper. I knew what Diana would do to climb to power. I knew how Bobby would gut my idea and sell it as his own. I knew how Leon would stand in the background, silent, watching it all unfold. They thought they killed my dream. But the funny thing about death, it clears your mind. I wasn't here to pitch anymore. I wasn't here to ask for a seat at their table. I was here to buy the damn table chairs and all. And when the smoke cleared, they'd realize the dream they mocked was the very empire they now worked for. Ted never looked like a man meant to change the world. Not back then. Not when his name was buried beneath startup failures, unpaid bills, and a wardrobe that hadn't changed since college. He wasn't flashy. He didn't throw around buzzwords or wear a watch worth more than rent. But he saw things, patterns, gaps, the invisible space between innovation and ignorance. The problem was, no one else saw him, not even Diana. She used to sit across from him in that rusted-out co-working space, eyes glued to her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. Everything about her was sharp: her cheekbones, her wardrobe, her timing. She was brilliant, calculated, unreachable. They'd met during a pitch event in the city. Ted's prototype had just crashed mid-demo, the screen blinking like it was mocking him. Diana had watched with a neutral face, then left halfway through. Later, she said she didn't even remember the pitch. "You didn't stand out," she'd said flatly. "You blended in like beige wallpaper." That was Diana, honest, brutal, efficient. But before the ambition hardened her edges, they had shared something strange: a flicker of connection between late-night brainstorms and vending machine dinners. Ted remembered once when she'd fallen, asleep at her desk, head resting on her forearm, a strand of hair caught between her lips. He'd almost woken her, almost. Instead, he'd sat there, wondering how someone so brilliant could also look so breakable. Back then, she was still reachable. Now, she was the CFO of a tech empire, and Ted was supposed to be a ghost. But ghosts don't forget, not Bobby either. Slick, smug, and always in the room at the right time. Bobby had a talent not for building, but for sniffing out who could build something, then beating them to the punch. He was the one who took Ted's initial prototype, slapped his own branding on it, and sold it to a VC firm within a week. Bobby hadn't built a damn thing in his life, but he sure knew how to destroy someone else's. Don't take it personally. He'd told Ted once, after sealing the deal that had cut him out completely, "You're the idea guy. I'm the closer. It's just business." Then he'd smiled like betrayal was just a handshake. But it wasn't Bobby who haunted Ted. It was Leon. She never joined in the mockery, never laughed with Bobby or looked through him like Diana. Leon was the intern, then silent, observant, always scribbling in her notebook like she was collecting data on everyone around her. She never spoke unless asked. She never sided with anyone. But she saw, the day Ted's startup collapsed, when he walked out with a cardboard box and a shattered heart. She had been the only one who looked up. Just a glance, but enough to burn itself into his memory. She knew, and maybe that's why she was still the only one he hadn't decided what to do with in this second life, because she didn't help, but she didn't hurt him either. Now, standing in the exact same apartment he had left 2 years ago, the one with the water stains on the ceiling and the radiator that hissed like a snake, Ted took a breath. It smelled like old ambition and cheap coffee. But this time, he didn't feel small. He felt loaded, with knowledge, with timing, with power they couldn't begin to understand yet. First move, crypto. He'd ride the wave before they even learned the word blockchain. Second, Buy up key domain names, those tiny pieces of digital real estate that would become priceless in the months to come. Third, target the industry Bobby had cheated him out of and destroy it from the inside. But before all that, Ted needed to see her again, Diana. Not to win her back, not to hurt her. To you understand her, because part of him still couldn't reconcile the woman who had once shared a soggy sandwich with him on a fire escape, with the woman who later laughed when Bobby stripped his name from the pitch deck like it never existed. Maybe she had changed, or maybe he just never really knew her. Either way, this time, he'd make sure they knew him. He wasn't coming back to beg, he was coming back to buy, and when he walked into that boardroom again, it wouldn't be to pitch. It would be to acquire. The elevator chimed like it was mocking him. Floor 27, headquarters of Nova Technologies. Ted stepped out, crisp, in a suit that fit better than anything he'd worn in his old life. No more hoodies and scuffed sneakers. This time, the clothes matched the man he'd become. Dangerous, prepared, silent. Nova's lobby hadn't changed. Still cold, still minimalist, still obsessed with impressing investors more than valuing innovation. But Ted didn't come to be impressed. He came to watch their jaws drop. "Can I help you?" asked the receptionist, not looking up. Ted slid the signed acquisition packet across the counter. Her fingers froze mid-keystroke. The moment the glass doors opened, Diana looked up from the table. Boardroom, 10 suits, Bobby at the head, Leon in the corner, pen poised but unmoving. Diana's eyes landed on Ted and didn't flinch, but the air around her did. Subtle tension, one heartbeat slower. "Ted?" Her voice was calm, too calm, like she hadn't expected to ever say his name again. "Afternoon," he said. "I believe item 7 on your agenda is me." Bobby stood, laughing. "Wait, this is a prank, right? You get your funding off some meme coin and now you think you're, what, buying your way in?" Ted walked past him without a glance. "I'm not buying in, Bobby. I'm buying you out." He dropped the contract on the table. Diana scanned the first few lines. Her fingers twitched barely, but Ted caught it. The first crack. Her voice faltered. You're acquiring Nova?" He didn't smile. "Effective immediately." It wasn't supposed to be like this. Not at first. Ted had planned to rebuild in silence, strike later, let them drown in their own mistakes. But when he saw the latest prototype Nova was about to release a knockoff of his original code, just with flashier branding, he knew waiting was no longer an option. They hadn't just moved on. They'd copied him. Again. And Diana had signed off on it. Bobby fumbled with his words, trying to spin it, but no one was listening. They were looking at Ted now, listening to him, trying to figure out how he came back with enough capital to swallow a tech firm whole. Leon looked up from her notes. Their eyes met. She didn't look surprised, and that rattled him more than anything. After the meeting, Ted lingered in the hallway. He didn't have to. He already owned the building now, but he waited for her. Diana stepped out first, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You planned this, not a question. You gave me the blueprint when you threw me out." "I never threw you out, Ted." "Didn't stop it either," he replied coldly. "You let Bobby rewrite history and pretended you couldn't see it." She scoffed. "I didn't know what Bobby was doing." "You think I wanted you gone?" "I think you watched it happen," Ted said, voice sharper now. "I think it was convenient. I think if I hadn't failed, you'd never have had room to rise." Diana flinched, just slightly, but enough. "You think I rose because you fell?" She whispered, anger heating her words. "You didn't stop falling bricks from hitting me." Silence hung thick between them. Finally, she spoke, low and firm. "You don't get to rewrite the past just because you bought the building. You don't know what I gave up." "No," he said, "but I'm about to find out." He walked past her. That night, Ted sat alone in the old apartment again. The silence wasn't comforting this time. It echoed. He'd imagined this moment coming back, reclaiming power, watching their faces crack under the weight of his success, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like rot, because something about Diana's voice wouldn't leave him. "You don't know what I gave up." He thought back to that last week before the collapse. The long hours, the sudden closed-door meetings between Bobby and Diana, the look Leon had when she saw the new org chart, his name gone, like he'd never been there. He had always assumed betrayal. But what if it wasn't that simple? The doorbell rang. Once, he opened it to find Leon, coat damp from rain, eyes sharp. "You missed something," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "I missed a lot of things," he replied, closing the door. "No," she said. "I mean really missed." You think Diana cut you out? You think she didn't fight back? Ted stiffened. Leon dropped a folder onto the table. Internal memos, emails, time-stamped pushback. She pushed for your name to stay on the patent filing. She told Bobby she'd walk if they erased your contribution. They overruled her. She handed in her resignation that night. She never left. They begged her to stay, promised equity, more control. She took it so she could salvage what she could of your original code. You were already gone by then, Ted. You didn't see her break. Ted sank into the chair. Leon folded her arms. You think you're the only one who got betrayed? The folder stared back at him like an open wound. Everything he thought he knew wrong. The real betrayal wasn't what they did. It was how little he understood the people who stayed behind. He'd come back with the fire to burn everything down. Now, he wasn't sure what needed burning. Ted didn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, Leon's words echoing in his head. You think you're the only one who got betrayed? Every piece of that folder sat heavy on his chest like bricks rebuilding a truth he never wanted to admit. Diana had fought for him, quietly, behind closed doors. While he was storming out, full of rage, she was being silenced in his defense. He had painted her as the villain for years. That made his revenge simple, justified. But now it felt like he'd just burned down the only person who had tried to protect him. He rolled over, burying his face in his hands. The man who had spent years crafting his comeback, outsmarting, outperforming, outlasting, suddenly felt hollow. Not because the plan had failed. It had worked perfectly. He'd reclaimed control, silenced Bobby, outmaneuvered every lie. But what do you do when the one lie you needed most, that she didn't care, turns out to be false? Ted stared at his laptop screen for hours the next morning, trying to write the next press release. He couldn't focus. Every headline in his mind dissolved into one image. Diana standing in that boardroom, her expression unreadable, her voice calm, but her fingers trembling. He hadn't noticed it in the moment, but now he couldn't unsee it. He found himself pacing, back and forth, back again. Anger was clean, easy. It gave him direction. But this was chaos. Because now he wasn't sure who he was angry at. Bobby, Diana, himself? Especially himself. He'd assumed silence meant guilt, that her refusal to reach out after he was pushed out proved her complicity. But the memos said otherwise. Her resignation letter dated 2 days after his departure, her internal warnings, her calls to legal, trying to delay the product launch until his contributions were acknowledged. She had stayed for him, and now, he had humiliated her in front of everyone. Leon had known. Of course she had. She watched everything, saw the way Diana folded into herself in meetings, how she clashed with Bobby in quiet moments when no one else paid attention. And still, Leon had let Ted walk into that boardroom with fire in his hands. He picked up his phone, opened Diana's contact, paused. What would he say? I'm sorry I burned you with the same fire I thought you lit under me. I thought you were the villain because it made surviving easier. I needed you to be wrong so I could feel right. He locked the screen. Instead, he walked past the corporate tower he now owned, past the cafe where they'd once sketched out product ideas on napkins, past the alley where Bobby had cornered him after that first pitch rejection and called him dead weight. He walked until the city blurred into motion, and he wasn't Ted the CEO, or Ted the founder, or Ted the reborn. He was just Ted, alone, again. By evening, he found himself outside her apartment building. He didn't remember getting there, just his feet carrying him. He didn't go in. Could end single quotes T.so he sat on the bench across the street, shadows swallowing him, and watched the light in her window flicker on. Inside, she passed by the curtains, on the phone, smiling. That hurt more than it should have, because it meant she had learned how to survive without him. Maybe had even healed from everything he still carried. Or maybe she was just better at hiding it. 2 days passed. Ted didn't show up at the office. Bobby called twice. He ignored it. Leon didn't call. She knew he needed silence more than advice. On the 3rd day, he finally stepped back into the headquarters. Everyone looked up, half in fear, half in awe. He walked past the executive lounge, stopped at Diana's old office. Her nameplate had been removed. He knocked on Leon's door instead. She looked up, unsurprised. You look like hell, she said. I earned it. She waited. I didn't just come back for revenge, he said quietly. I came back because I thought I needed to correct something. And now I think I might have just added more damage. Leon didn't answer. She just studied him, I need to make it right, Ted said finally. Then you'd better stop planning and start listening. He nodded and left. That evening, he went back to her, knocked this time. Diana opened the door with hesitation, her expression unreadable again. I'm not here to win, Ted said. I'm here because I think I lost something that mattered. A long silence. Then she stepped aside. He walked in. The apartment was quieter than he remembered. Softer. She had changed too. Less guarded. But harder in ways that didn't show. I saw the memos, he said. Her face didn't change. You could have told me, he added. You wouldn't have listened. He nodded. You're right. Another pause. I hurt you, he admitted. I didn't come to apologize. Not only for that. I came because I need to understand the whole truth. Not just the version I built to survive. Diana finally looked at him, really looked. You left me behind, she said. I thought you left me first. I never left, she whispered. This time he saw it, the tremble, not in her voice but in her resolve, and it matched his own. Two broken blueprints, still trying to rebuild. The silence between them lingered for a week. Ted didn't push. Diana didn't offer. They were talking again, but only at the surface level, safe topics, neutral ground. Neither dared go deeper, until Leon showed up at his office one morning, a single file folder in hand. She didn't knock. You need to see this, she said, dropping it on his desk. Ted opened it. One glance was enough. Inside were wire transfers, large sums, spread over years, all from the same offshore account, all routed to Bobby. But that wasn't the part that twisted Ted's gut. Attached to the last page was an email chain between Bobby and Diana. At least, that's how it looked. In it, Bobby detailed a plan, edged Ted out, used Diana's influence to secure board votes and dismantle the company's original vision. The date on the emails? 3 weeks before Ted's ousting. His blood ran cold. He looked up at Leon. Where did you get this? It was submitted anonymously to the board's ethics committee. Yesterday. Ted's jaw clenched. Do you believe it? She asked, tone unreadable. I don't know. He wanted to scream. He wanted to believe it was fake, some kind of setup. But the dates matched events too perfectly. And the transfers. The money didn't lie. She couldn't have, he muttered. You sure? Leon asked quietly. Because you were pretty. Sure. Before too. Ted sat there long after she left. The folder burned in his mind. Everything they'd rebuilt in the last few days, every inch of fragile honesty felt like it had just been crushed underfoot. But something didn't sit right. Diana had been cold at times, yes. But greedy? Deceptive? That wasn't her. Still, doubt gnawed at him. He walked out mid-afternoon, folder in hand, and went straight to her apartment. This time, Diana didn't answer the door. But her neighbor said she'd left early that morning, for the airport. Ted froze. He called Leon. Find out if Diana booked a flight. Already checked, she said. Paris. One way. That punched a hole through his chest. She was running. And if she was running, was it because she was guilty? Or because she knew this time Ted wouldn't believe her? He barely made the last flight out. Paris felt like a dream, too clean, too distant, too quiet. But after 2 hours of searching, he found her. Not in a luxury hotel or hiding in some executive suite. She was standing in a public plaza, watching a group of kids chase birds across cobblestones. She looked tired. Not like someone who had won. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, stepping up behind her. She didn't flinch. I was going to, she said softly. Then why run? Because I knew you'd never ask. You'd just show up with proof in hand, ready to decide for me. He held out the folder. Then tell me it's fake. She turned, took it from him, flipped through the pages. Her fingers were steady this time. I've seen these before, she said. 2 years ago. Ted blinked. What? They're fabricated, deep faked. Even the transfers. I reported them back then. The same package was used to try and blackmail me. When I refused to vote with Bobby, his head spun. Then why didn't you show me? Because you weren't ready to believe anything that didn't match your story. The weight of it landed hard. Diana took a deep breath. I stayed because I thought I could protect your legacy, even after you left. But Bobby, he knew how to cover his tracks, and I didn't have the power to stop him alone. Why Paris? Ted asked. She hesitated. This is where it all started. Our first pitch. You remember? He did. They had met an investor here. Young, bold, eccentric. Their idea was too early then. But Diana had sworn they'd come back one day when they were ready. I needed to remember who I was before all the war, she said. Before the betrayals, before the guilt. Ted didn't know what to say. He had chased power, revenge, control. She had chased peace. I believe you, he finally whispered. I'm not asking you to, she said. I'm just asking you to see me, not the version you built in your mind. And he did, clearly, maybe for the first time in years. She wasn't the enemy. She had never been, but someone still was, because if this was the second time the blackmail package had surfaced, that meant someone wanted to keep them apart, still. And they were closer than either of them realized. The boardroom was full, every seat taken, the air sharp with tension. Investors, executives, journalists, even former employees packed into the newly renovated hall at Orion Corp's Global HQ. Every camera was rolling. The live stream had gone viral within minutes. Ted stood at the front of the room. Diana stood beside him. He hadn't planned it this way. But once the truth came out, once the forged documents were traced back to Bobby and the real offshore accounts were uncovered, the only way to truly reclaim everything was to do it publicly. To burn the rot out at its roots. This wasn't just business. It was justice. Ted adjusted his mic. I founded Orion with two goals, he said, voice calm but carrying. To revolutionize a stagnant industry, and to prove that vision beats greed. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But today, that ends. Behind him, a massive screen lit up with a video feed. Bobby's face appeared. Grainy footage. Time-stamped 3 years ago. He was in a private lounge laughing, drink in hand. He's too busy dreaming. Bobby's voice echoed. Let him build the toy. We'll take it when it's worth something. Gasps filled the room. Another clip. Another time-stamp. This time Bobby wasn't laughing. He was giving instructions to a hacker, paid under a fake shell corporation, to fabricate transfer logs and falsify Diana's name on incriminating documents. Ted turned to the audience. Everything you just saw has been verified by 3 independent firms and forensics analysts. This man, once trusted with executive power, orchestrated a long-term scheme to destroy the company from within. People were already whispering, phones buzzing, notes being passed, and he almost succeeded. Ted added, because I let him. Diana stepped forward now. I was accused of betrayal, she said, labeled a manipulator, when in reality, I was fighting a war no one could see, one I never wanted. But I stayed, because I believed in what we built. She paused, and in who we used to be. Ted looked at her, the weight of her words anchoring something in him. He had nearly let his pain erase everything she had protected in silence. But not anymore. Security entered the room and handed a folder to the moderator, signed arrest warrants. The board chair stood next. We hereby announce that Robert E. Maxwell, former acting COO, has been removed from all positions and will face charges under federal and international law. Flashes burst through the crowd. The media erupted. But Ted wasn't done. One last thing, he said. To the people who believed in us, who worked through chaos and uncertainty, I promise you, we're back. And this time, we're doing it right. Applause broke out, slow at first, then rising like thunder. Still, it wasn't until they walked off stage and closed the door behind them that the real climax struck. The hallway was quiet, just the two of them. Ted exhaled hard. It's over. But Diana shook her head. No, it's beginning. He looked at her, confused. Bobby was just the blade, but he wasn't the hand holding it. Ted narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? I found a secondary chain in the data logs, she said quietly. Buried deep. Bobby wasn't acting alone. His stomach dropped. Another layer. Another enemy. Diana pulled up her tablet and handed it to him. A name flashed across the screen. One Ted hadn't spoken in years. His father's. Impossible, he whispered. He's been out of the picture for over a decade. He left. He never cared. No, Diana said. He cared too much. He built his own empire in the shadows. And he wanted yours to fall. Ted's mind reeled. Suddenly, the rebirth, his second chance, felt like the opening move in a much longer game. My father was the real enemy all along? Diana nodded slowly. And he's still watching. Ted stared at the screen, everything inside him boiling. Rage, confusion, grief, but beneath it all, clarity. This wasn't the end. It was the true beginning. The final confrontation still lay ahead, and this time, Ted wouldn't fight to reclaim the past. He would fight to protect the future. 3 weeks later, The skyline of Shanghai glowed behind the massive glass windows of Ted's new office, Orion Global's Eastern Division. A new branch, a new era, but none of it was for show. This was strategic, because the final war was no longer about corporate takeovers or public humiliation. It was about legacy and ending the one that had tried to erase him. Ted stared at the encrypted dossier Diana had decrypted last night. Names, codes, transfer paths. Years of hidden investments and silent acquisitions, his father's fingerprints across dozens of shell companies that had undermined Orion from the inside. All these years, it wasn't about Bobby. Bobby was a pawn. His father, Theodore Graves. Seoster had never truly disappeared. He had simply changed the board, moved the pieces from the shadows. But now, Ted was calling checkmate. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Diana asked behind him, her voice steady, but her concern real. Ted nodded. He started this in silence. I'll finish it in front of the world. She walked to his side, pressing a chip drive into his palm. This is everything. Every offshore deal, every illegal buyout. He used your name, forged your signature on some of the worst. Once this is public, there's no coming back for him. I don't want revenge, Ted said, voice low. I want release. Diana looked into his eyes. Then make sure the world knows who really tried to destroy you. Later that night, in a global live stream titled The Graves Revelation, Ted stood alone, but taller than ever. I was never the son he wanted, he began, but I became the man he feared. The screen behind him lit up with graphs, financial trails, hidden partnerships. For 20 minutes, Ted exposed the entire secret empire his father had built, every account linked to foreign exploitation, data theft, and industrial sabotage. And when I rebuilt Orion, he said, he tried to poison it again. But I'm done living in the shadows of men who fear progress. He played the final clip, a voice message from Graves Seoster himself. You'll never be more than a footnote, Theodore. I made you, and I can break you again. Ted stared into the lens. You didn't make me. You ran from me, and I rose anyway. The feed ended. The world erupted. Authorities issued a warrant for Theodore Graves Seoster. The next morning, all his companies fell under investigation. Stock prices plummeted. And for the first time in 3 decades, the business empire his father had created started to crumble. Justice wasn't loud. It was surgical. And final. In the days that followed, Ted received hundreds of messages, old partners apologizing, former critics congratulating, new collaborators reaching out. But he didn't answer any of them. He had only one place to go. He met Diana on the rooftop of their original office building, the small, now symbolic one where it all began. The sun was just rising, painting the horizon gold. She turned to him. You did it. No, he said. We did. He reached into his coat and handed her a folder. What's this? Our next move, Ted said. I want you to be co-CEO. No more shadows. No more silos. You carried this company when I couldn't. You deserve to lead it with me. She blinked, stunned. Ted, this isn't about starting over, he said. It's about moving forward, together. A long silence passed between them. Then slowly, she smiled, one of the few real ones he'd seen in years. I accept. He turned back to the skyline. They mocked my dream, laughed when I fell, betrayed me, lied to me, tried to erase me. But I didn't rise from the ashes to burn quietly. He looked at her. I came back to own the fire. And then, as if on cue, the Orion logo on the neighboring tower lit up brighter than ever, visible for miles. Below them, the city pulsed with life, unaware that 2 people standing in the wind had just reshaped the future. Ted didn't need revenge anymore. He had redemption. He had peace. He had Diana. And above all, he had something no amount of betrayal could ever take. His dream.